In the news this week, the Christian Institute urges Ofsted not to embrace aggressive secularism. The Welsh Government is accused of undermining Northern Ireland's democracy on abortion. And when it comes to sex education, most Britons say parents, not politicians, know best. Hello. The Christian Institute has urged Ofsted not to enforce aggressive secularism under the cover of muscular liberalism. The warning follows a major speech by the watchdog's Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, who talked about religious groups perverting education and called on head teachers to tackle those who undermine British values. In comments reported on the front page of The Times, Spielman warned against listening to conservative voices in religion and cited the Christian Institute as an example. Simon Calvert, Deputy Director at the Christian Institute, joins us in the studio to discuss the story. Simon, what are your concerns for how Ofsted's inspectors may interpret Amanda Spielman's comments?
Well, our concern is that some inspectors might interpret this idea of muscular liberalism as meaning they have to enforce more secularism. Now, if Ofsted was able to enforce the great British tradition of liberalism, freedom to disagree, then that will be fine. But the concern is that people will take a much more narrow approach to it than that.
The Christian Institute has disagreed with Ofsted's approach to British values in the past. Could that be a factor in her comments?
Well, we have criticised the way some Ofsted inspectors have gone about their work in the past. For example, the infamous example of Vishnitz, the Orthodox Jewish school, where the inspectors tried to tell them that they had to promote transgenderism to 5-year-olds. A lot of people would think that was Ofsted inspectors being much too muscular. And then we also criticised them in cases where they have really rather unprofessionally been asking teachers and Christian teachers about their views on same-sex marriage. That's not their job. I mean, they need to know that just because somebody is religious and has socially conservative views, that does not mean they've got their first foot on the escalator to violent extremism.
Thank you, Simon. Anglican Mainstream and the Evangelical Alliance also criticised the Chief Inspector's remarks.
The Ofsted Inspectorate are confused. They're confused about the nature of Islamic fundamentalism, and they confuse it with being similar to standard Christian teaching on marriage and sexuality, which is what Christian Institute stands for. I think they're also confused about British values. They don't know what they are. They certainly include freedom of speech. And finally, they're confused about extremism. Extremism, for me, is a violent response involving physical harm to people, and to confuse that with and equate that with the work of Christian Institute in defending marriage and sexuality seems to me just illiterate.
Amanda Spielman talked about a liberalism that's strong enough to tolerate dissenting views. But then she goes on to criticise views that dissent from her own and are not violent in any way, shape or form, or even suggesting violence. And that doesn't seem like liberalism to me, so some clarity around this issue would be really helpful.
GP surgeries have been advised to display LGBT symbols to encourage gay patients to come out to their doctor. The advice came in a study published by the British Journal of General Practice, which also recommended that waiting rooms have LGBT-friendly posters and leaflets on show. It was praised by Professor Camilla Hawthorne of the Royal College of GPs as a good thing, but critics have slammed the move, with the Christian Institute saying the advice is misguided. A GP surgery is meant to be a neutral place where everyone is welcome, but the rainbow flag is divisive and exclusionary. GPs should just ignore this advice. Andrew Bridgen MP also opposed the move and questioned why doctors were being advised to pander to the PC brigade. The Welsh Government has come under fire for moving ahead with plans to fund abortions for women from Northern Ireland. Its consultation document notes that abortion is a devolved matter for the Northern Ireland Assembly, but goes on to say that it wants to enable women from the province to use abortion facilities in Wales. Speaking for the Christian Institute, Kieran Kelly said the move undermines the strong protections for unborn children in Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland's laws are good laws. They protect the most vulnerable in society, the unborn, and there's maybe 100,000 people who owe their very lives to the protections these laws afford, and they were put in place by democratically elected representatives, and these proposals completely disregard the will of the Northern Ireland people. And I would urge the people of Wales and Northern Ireland to use this consultation as an opportunity to tell the Welsh Government that they don't want taxpayers' money to be used to undermine democracy by funding abortions.
And finally, parents are best placed to decide when young children should learn about sex, say the majority of the British public. In an online poll, given the options of parents, teachers, politicians, doctors or children, almost 2/3 backed parents. The poll by Comres for the Evangelical Alliance found 65% thought that parents were most appropriate. 66% said politicians were the least appropriate. Almost 4 in 5 agreed that schools should make the content of relationships education available to parents before it is taught. It comes as the government looks to change teaching on relationships and sex education for children across England. When we spoke to Dr. David Landrum of the Evangelical Alliance earlier, he called on ministers to respect parental authority.
Parents know best, and the government need to respect that. It's a very clear message throughout the poll. We want to ensure that the consultation accounts for this and is not shaped by politics or ideologies, but it's shaped by parents who care most and know what's best for their children in terms of what's taught and when it's taught.
Well, that's all for this week. For regular updates and information on all of our stories, plus much more, visit our website at christian.org.uk. Until next time, goodbye.